Hey everyone, welcome to the One Thing monthly webinar. My name is Jeff Woods. I run the company behind the best-selling book, The One Thing. Today we are having a conversation about how ordinary people build extraordinary wealth. And this topic came from a brand new book that came out, Everyday Millionaires. This is a book that has taken off behind the scenes. We've been watching the sales number, and all we have to say is this thing has absolutely dominated, and we know why. It's a topic that I think is relevant to a lot of us. And before we dive into introducing our guest today, we want to let you know how these two books align, because our hope is that by the end of this conversation, you understand one thing you can do, such that by doing it would make building extraordinary wealth easier or unnecessary for you. It all starts with what I believe is my favorite quote from The One Thing. It's from F.M. Alexander. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits. Their habits decide their futures. I know that when my wife and I have sat down and we thought about our ambitions when it came to wealth, I just asked the question, what are the habits that we currently don't have, that if we acquired them, would make achieving that level of wealth easier or unnecessary for us? And what we know from doing the research is that it takes on average 66 days to form a habit, not 21, not 30. According to the University College of London in 2009, they found that the average number of days it takes to hit the point of automaticity is 66 days. So as you go through today's training, really think about how many days would it take me to form the one habit that I'm going to identify in this training. And here's what's cool about this is once you identify that one thing, that lead domino, if you will, if you line those dominoes up correctly, if you knock that first domino down, what happens? The rest of them fall. And what we know from the research is that a 2-inch domino doesn't just knock down a domino of equal size. It actually knocks one down that's 50% larger. So a 2-inch domino can knock over a 3-inch domino, 3 knocks over 4.5. And this really compounds over time, just like money. And what's cool about this is by the 18th domino in, you could knock down the Leaning Tower of Pisa. By the 23rd domino, you could knock down the Eiffel Tower, not the one in Vegas, the real one. By the 31st domino, you could build a structure that would loom 3,000 feet above Mount Everest. And by the 57th domino, you would reach almost from the Earth to the moon. So when we have a conversation today here with our guest about what it looks like to build wealth, do you think that becoming wealthy is something where you just make a decision and boom, 24 hours later, you have extraordinary wealth? Put yes or no in the questions box. See what you guys think. I got a bunch of no's. That's right. Your journey to building wealth is probably like a long, long train. It starts out too slow to notice until it's moving so fast that it just cannot be stopped. And folks, that's why we're so excited to introduce today's guest, because he's going to help you understand that your extraordinary wealth is going to be built sequentially, not simultaneously. One thing at a time, over time, will lead to extraordinary wealth. And with that, we are so excited to welcome today's guest. He is a best-selling author. He is a personal finance expert. Chris Hogan, thank you so much for being with us here today on the One Thing webinar.
Well, thank you, my friend. It's an honor to be with you.
Yes, and I just sent over a webcam request, so people should be able to see both of our faces at the same time. Let's go ahead.
Very good.
There we go.
All right.
And there he is. So I told Mackenzie before this, my one thing is to make sure that I do the best job possible to make sure that I match the outfit of our guest. So
yes. You have very good stylistic choices, my friend.
Thank you. Well, Chris, where did this idea of Everyday Millionaires come from?
Well, I had released my first book in 2016, Retire Inspired. And really what that was America's wake up call on retirement. So many people were telling me, Chris, I'm not saving much. The government's going to take care of me. Social Security will take care of me. And I'm going, no, it's not. And so I realized a lot of people weren't aware of what it was going to take, but they more importantly weren't aware of what it is they wanted to do in retirement. And so I released that book to kind of get people thinking and to kind of coach them right where they are. Well, as I started doing some media interviews, I'll never forget, I was in a big city doing a media hit on a panel, and the panelist told me, he goes, Chris, it's a shame that the American dream is dead and gone. And I looked at him and I go, what are you talking about? I said, no, the American dream is not dead and gone. And I walked through it and had another media hit a few weeks later, and someone said the same thing. And I said, okay, enough is enough. Because I know, having been in the money game for over 20 years, that you can build wealth over time. I know consistent people that focus and are intentional with their money can build wealth. And so I wanted to prove it. I wanted to find out how many millionaires do we have out there? How did they build wealth? What did they do over time? Were they trust fund babies? Were they people that just had it handed to them? Or were these hardworking people that built it themselves? And what we found out by talking to over 10,000 millionaires across the country is that these millionaires are not trust fund babies. These are hardworking, everyday men and women all around the country. And so that was the goal, was to prove this and to show people the truth.
Give people a sense for if they don't know what it means to be a net worth millionaire. How do you define that?
Right. For me, it's real simple. I mean, you look at and take everything that you own. That can be your 401k, your 403b, your Roth IRAs, your home, equity in your home, whatever that is, add that up and then subtract out everything you owe on. So what you own minus anything that has debt on it. If that end number is $1 million or more, then congratulations, you're an everyday millionaire. And a lot of people get confused with this. And so I developed a free tool at my website, chrishogan360.com/net worth. There's a free net worth calculator on there to help people get started.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's kind of debunk this, because I know that people have these ideas of what it takes to become a net worth millionaire. What are the myths? What are the truths?
Well, the reality is, the first one I hit on, that a lot of people think that these are trust fund babies. They were just handed this money, from rich parents or something. And the reality is 79% of the millionaires that we talk to didn't inherit one dime, not a dime. That means these were people that were focused and hardworking, and they built wealth themselves. And so you look at that and you have to think about what it is you believe. Right. And another myth is that millionaires have to have a high paying job. A third of the millionaires that we talked to didn't have a 6-figure household income in a single working year. Household income. They didn't. And so again, these are people that were making under 6 figures, but they were focused and consistent in their investing over time. Another one is that you have to have this high career, this big, powerful, high-powered career. The reality, in our research, we found the top 3 positions of these millionaires were an engineer, which doesn't surprise us, right? Engineers are good at planning stuff. Number 2 was accountants. Well, they're good at counting stuff. I wasn't surprised there either. Number 3 blew me away. Number 3 was teachers. School teachers and college professors came in at number 3. Now, people were shocked by this, but if you stop to think about it, if you're investing in the school world, they have 403bs, not 401ks, but you invest consistently over time for 25 years in that and allow compound interest to do what it does, it grows money. But then on the other side of it, if they're focused and they're attacking and paying off their mortgage, which the average millionaire, according to my research, shows they're paying their homes off in right around 11 years. Okay, so they're focused on this and attacking it. So if you take the value of the home plus the money they have in their 403b, then yes, they can become everyday millionaires. So it's less about how much money you're making. It's more about the habits that you have and what you're doing with money over time.
So let's talk about this, because this is a subject that rings really true to me. Prior to starting this company with Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, who wrote The One Thing, I was in medical sales and I had a very nice income. And yet I found myself and my wife feeling house poor. And then all of a sudden, when my company, they rightfully had to do this, they had to make a change to our commission structure to remain competitive in the marketplace. All of a sudden, things shifted and things get really hairy. You look at so many people who, as a household, maybe they are at 70,000, maybe they are above $100,000, and like you're saying, the average was below that. So what are they doing wrong?
Well, I think, there are a few things with that. Too oftentimes we live in this microwave culture where we want things fast and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. Typically Gen Xers and Gen Ys and even millennials have thrown caution to the wind and taken on a bunch of debt to achieve the status their parents took 30 years to build. And
Mm.
so mindset wise, we've got to look at this and start to realize, the type of home that you live in doesn't equate to how well you're doing. I mean, according to my research, the average millionaire was living in a 2,600 square foot home, 2,600 square feet, and they'd lived in the house for an average of 17 years.
Hmm.
So these weren't people that were going after 12,000 square feet homes and all this other stuff. They're mindful, and they're really focused on themselves, and they're not worried about what other people think. And so I think in this, we've got to reset kind of our mind and realize what's the ultimate goal? What are we trying to achieve? And being house poor, a lot of people have been there where you overbuy. Or get this, you buy a home qualifying on two incomes, but then you just decide to start to have a family. And now somebody wants to stay home. Now
Mm.
that double income that qualified you for the home is actually going to put you in a position to disqualify you to continue to pay for it because the income has been reduced. And so I want people to go into home buying with their eyes wide open. Don't let it become an emotional decision. I've done it. I've made that mistake where you see this home and you just had to have it, but you realize it's about 50,000 above your budget. And we all say, oh, another $300 isn't that bad. No, it's not month one or two. But when you get a few years down the road, you start to feel a little bit more strapped. So I think
Yeah.
we need to breathe and start to make long term decisions, not short term decisions based on just wants.
Take us back to younger Chris Hogan. Take us back to prior to doing all the research, prior to your 20 years in the business.
Yeah.
What was the mindset that you had around money, and what were some of the mistakes that you made along the way?
All right, you're gonna just put me out here like this. All right, well let me shoot you straight. Prior to being in the where I am now, flashing back, my mindset was is that I had to grow my income.
Mm.
That I wasn't going to take my money seriously until I got to this certain level. The problem with that is that in that mindset, even as your income grows, so can our stupid, right? So can the toys. The size toys you buy grow when your income grows. And so
Mhm.
I had this wake up call of realizing, wait a minute, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to enough right before I get serious. So I had to start to get serious. Mistakes I've made, oh my gosh. I was having my first kid. We both had cars at the time, and I thought, well, you can't bring a baby home in a sedan. You got to have an SUV, right? And I went to just go look at an SUV, and then people, I know people that are watching have done this, where you were just going to look, right? And guess what? I came home with almost a $700 car payment on this SUV to bring home a 8 pound baby, right? It didn't equate. And so, that was a massive mistake. And of course, credit card on the college campus, that was a mistake. It turned out to be a $7,000 pizza, right? You know how they offer you the free pizza when you sign up for the credit card? That was the
Yeah.
world's most expensive pizza, right? Because I did a lot of silly on spring break and running around. And so, despite those mistakes, and a lot of the people listening and watching, maybe you've made a mistake with money. Maybe you're in the middle of it right now. I just want them to hear this. Where you are right now doesn't have to be where you end up. What I mean by that is we can change it, right? A mistake is something that happens once, but when you keep doing it time after time after time, let's not call it a mistake anymore. Now it's called a choice. And so when we make better choices for our money, we can get better results for our future.
Yeah, I remember I was in a mastermind with my partner Gary Keller, which for the people who may not be familiar with who he is, he started Keller Williams. It's the largest real estate company in the world, and I remember him saying that you're never more than 5 years away from
Mhm,
everything that you could possibly want. Like you think
mhm.
about the dream, the things that you can't even perceive to be possible. It can all be possible in 5 years if you line the dominoes up correctly, identify your one thing, and you whack away at that thing until it falls.
I
We
like
just
that. No, that is so very true. And I'm going to tell you this, as I look and as I've talked to people, people are good at writing down goals, right? People are good. They can put it down on paper. But I ask them, I go, is that a goal you're interested in, or is that a goal that you absolutely have to achieve? You see, you got to be a little bit more different. You got to think differently and not only set the goal, but I want people to take it a step further. Jeff, I've been telling people, I want you to not only identify your goal, I want you to list out what are you willing to sacrifice to get there. You see, we never talk about the sacrifice factor, but to gain something, you're going to have to give up some things, right? You have to give up a little bit more sleep and you're going to have to hustle a little bit more. But what I want people to do is to aim for things that are worthwhile. Do things that you're going to feel good about that have a legacy impact for you and your family.
So you said identify the why, identify what you're willing to give up. And I think a lot of people, out of curiosity, for those of you who are joining us live, how many of you are married, in a committed relationship, have a significant other? You know, if for the men out there, what's yours is hers and what's hers is hers. You know what I'm talking about. So here's the question, Chris. What How would you coach somebody to begin having the conversation with a significant other? Because
Hmm.
what we have found, we host every year, we host a couples goal setting retreat. And what we
Right.
find is very rarely do a committed partnership have the same goals.
Yeah. No, and I think too often times when dealing with relationships, we automatically assume that each person has to surrender their goal, right? That we have to give up what we want and sacrifice for what they want. And I think the best thing a committed couple could do is to identify the shared goals. What are the family goals, the things that we're striving after? And I think it's important to hear from both sides before we come up with that master list. Like in my book, Retire Inspired, as I was telling people to start to get prepared for retirement, the first step I wanted them to take was to have a dream meeting together. Meaning, I wanted you to share, what do you want retirement to look like? And as I talked to a few people a few years prior to releasing the book, as I was doing the research, you'd have one spouse that wanted to travel a lot and another spouse that might want to travel all around the house a lot, right? There's always a sense of humor in that you're never automatically aligned, but they both had places they wanted to go. They both had people they wanted to do for in their families. They both wanted to do some mission trips. And what I did in talking to them was I gave them permission to share their dream with each other. See, it's impossible to support somebody in their dream if you don't know it. So, my tip is when you're talking to your spouse or significant other, ask them about their dream and do this: hush. Like, be careful. Don't make a weird facial gesture. Don't do anything because we're already so personal with our goals. And a lot of times life has happened so much, we've forgotten the goal ourselves, but we know it. It's inside of us. It's that thing that we've been excited about most of our lives. Well, get reconnected with it. And that might take a few days, but give it some thought. But when your significant other is sharing their dream, just listen to it. And I want you
Yeah.
to watch their face, how they light up, getting excited about traveling, getting excited about doing things for grandkids that may come one day. Now, once you know it, you can support each other and start to identify, what do we need to do to put us on a track to achieve these goals?
Yeah, Salma asked a great question, which is, what does that look like when in the partnership one person is the saver and one person is the spender?
Oh, Selma, that's a good question. I know, number one, that God has a sense of humor. That's why we always tend to match up with somebody that's opposite us, right? But I think, again, going back to it, with one person being the saver and the other person being the spender, they can coexist. The main thing is what are we saving for, right? And how does that impact the family? Is it helpful or hopeful? And then what are we spending for? And it's okay to do a little bit of both, but we need to do it in alignment, right?
Yeah.
And so shared goals on the front end, that's why I talked about that first, because that then clearly identifies what are we going to do. So I encourage spouses out there, or to connected partners, to have a 30-minute budget meeting, right? Once a week initially. Just sit down and exercise the muscle of talking about money. You see, typically, Jeff, we only talk about money when there's not enough of it, right? And so now you got stress, you got anxiety, everybody's riled up. Well, that's a perfect combustion right there for an explosion. So let's flex the muscle and begin to talk about it when things are at the beginning of the month. And now you'll find that the communication gets easier because we flex that muscle.
Yeah. So to recap, what I'm hearing you say is it's not about your goals being the same. It's
Hmm.
about you creating an environment or a situation where you can share your goals with them, they can share their goals with you. You hush in between so that you gain insight. It's about understanding how can you support each other along your journey. And one resource that you shared is just to have some type of a regular meeting, which I chuckled and immediately reached and grabbed for my 411. This is a tool we use to have clarity on our priorities. And when I look at my number 4 priority for the year, Track spending daily and 50 family meetings. Like that
Wow.
50
That's
family meetings, and I track it down to the month and the week because I
yes.
understand that if Amy and I sit down on a weekly basis to at least talk about money, whether we're doing great or whether we suck at the time,
Hmm.
at least we can try to figure out how we grow together.
See, and the reality of that and the benefit of that is you all talking, what you do is start to gain understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to support something you don't understand. And so whether you do have one that's more of a spender and one that's more of a saver, what are we doing for the family? I'll never forget, I was talking to a young man and he went to see a marriage counselor and they had just gotten engaged and doing the premarital counseling stuff. And he said his marriage counselor told him he needed to speak French. And he was like, what? He said, the marriage counselor said, I need to speak we, not me. And
Yeah.
it's crazy because you take the focus off of self and you start to look at the family and what's in the best interest of the family, and doing that helps us reprioritize and just stay engaged.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to go big picture, for everybody who's listening or watching this, let's fast forward to that 5-year mark. We
Mm.
have everything we could possibly want. We have the wealth that we desire. And when we look backwards, we realize we had to become a certain type of person to take certain type of actions to have the type of results that we want. Talk to us about the mindset, the characteristics that you found when you studied over 10,000 net worth millionaires.
No, you're absolutely right. That the mindset is everything. And I start the book and I'm talking about it and looking at really three areas. If you're going to put yourself on a path to becoming an everyday millionaire, I think the first thing we have to look at is what do we believe? Right? What do you believe is possible? Now, I say this because I grew up in rural Kentucky, right? I didn't know of millionaires. I had no clue. I thought if there was a millionaire, it had to be an athlete, an entertainer, or a musician. I thought that's the only way. Well, that wasn't my frame of reference. But understanding what you believe can impact us a lot. And sometimes you have to think, what did your family say about money? What did they tell you was possible for you because you were a Smith or a Jones or a whatever in your family? You see, just because your family wasn't good with money doesn't mean you can't be. And
Mm,
so the beliefs are huge. Next, from beliefs, now it comes to knowledge. We have to grow in our knowledge. Like if you believe you can become an everyday millionaire and now you grow in your knowledge of, hey, how do I go about this? The importance of investing, how compound interest works. I love the domino example. I'm gonna have to use that somewhere, my friend. But our knowledge is huge, and so listening to podcasts and shows, reading books helps us to kind of bolster and understand what's out there and what's available. But the last piece of it, we've got belief, we got knowledge. The last piece is actions, right? Nothing happens until something happens. And so the actions are budgeting, starting to tell your money where to go instead of wondering where it went, right? Understanding where you are, attacking debt, knowing that when you get out of debt, you give yourself a raise. Right? Stop sending money to Visa and MasterCard. They're not going to be there to take care of you later on in life. Right? And so the importance of saving and having an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside will help you sleep and be more calm than you've ever known. Because if a car breaks down, you have money to go fix
mhm.
it. You don't have to stress. And then the fourth thing is investing. It's imperative to really invest consistently over time and be focused. But you said something, and I want to hit on this in the final piece. You said, it's 5 years and we've gotten where we want to go. Well, I think it's important for us to have the mindset of always having the spirit of giving back. I think giving is the best thing you could ever do with money. 70% of the millionaires that I talk to set aside money each and every month to give. And so
Hmm.
that mindset of being ready and willing to help someone in need, whether it's someone you're close to or something you hear about, that's a good thing. And it helps us to feel good when we help others.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard Gary say so many times, money's good for the good it can do. And
Mm,
it doesn't change you, it simply reveals you. If
yes.
you are a selfish person, it will just amplify that. If you are a generous person, it will simply amplify that. What did you find in your research?
Well, that over 90% of these millionaires learned about money from their parents. That it was a discussion. It was something that they had some awareness of, whether it was just young and they learned to save. You get, 20, $50 for your birthday. Their parents taught them, hey, we're going to set some of that back. So you have it for a later time in life or when there's something you're saving up for to be able to buy. But there were some characteristics that were shown throughout this study. And Jeff, I'd love to dig into those. Number one, these millionaires knew that they were intentional with their money. meaning that money didn't slide through their hands. They told it where to go, being very intentional. Number two, they were hardworking people. Over 98% of them said someone would describe them as hardworking, meaning that when they went to work, they did their job. They did it to the best of their ability, and they were really and truly dialed in. The third thing is that they're goal oriented. They knew the point of setting a goal and then working and establishing to get there. So goal setting was a big deal for these people as well. But they were also people that really understood that building wealth requires intentionality and time. That you can't build wealth quickly, right? I tell people there's a difference in the mindset between getting rich and building wealth, right? Getting rich means you took some enormous risk and you had some money come in, right? Building wealth means you had a goal and a plan and you did it consistently over time. Wealth
Mm.
people tend to hold on to it. Rich people tend to squander it.
So I want to go back to that quote from F.M. Alexander, and I'm going to show the slide right here. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits,
Mm.
and their habits decide their futures. So, Chris, when you talk about these millionaires being intentional, when you talk about them being hardworking, when you talk about them being goal oriented,
Mm.
what are those underlying habits that you have seen consistently that led to them becoming those types of people?
Well, the first thing is that jumped out at me, and I absolutely love this statistic, is that 73% of these millionaires never carried a dime of credit card debt. Okay. 73% never carried a dime. And that means if they used it, they paid the thing off or they didn't have it at all. And so that mindset tells me right now that they weren't willing to offer and give up their money to someone else. If they were going to buy it, they were going to save up and pay cash. I like that. The big one that I liked is 97% of these millionaires believe that they control their own destiny. 97% had that mindset that they weren't a victim, right? Regardless of where they grew up, regardless of where they went to school, this was not something that they were going to be deterred with. And
Hmm.
that's such a strong statement because I wasn't born with a silver spoon. Okay. I mean, I didn't have that. I was in a lower to middle income family growing up. And a lot of the people, your viewers are identifying with me. There, a lot of us have come from lower income families. And that upbringing, you got some qualities and traits from that, but that doesn't have to define your future. And so I love that they had that mindset. Also, 79% of them said the number one tool that they used to be able to build wealth was their employer sponsored retirement plans, meaning
Hmm.
they were in 401ks, 403bs, and using Roth IRAs and IRAs. They knew the value of compound interest. 68% of them said that they used an investment professional along the way as well. So they were going to a professional to help guide them. They didn't try to do it alone. So that's just a few of the things, the mindset. Oh, 62% of them went to a public state college. 62%. See, a lot of people think you got to go to some Ivy League school in order to become a millionaire or to be successful in life. That's not true. So 62% went to a state or public university, 9% went to a community college, 8% didn't go to college at all. And so this mindset of being goal oriented and controlling their destiny, it just shows these are hardworking, everyday people that were consistent, Jeff, over time.
What was a goal that you set for yourself, Chris, that maybe it scared you a little bit and
Oh,
yet you blew it out of the water?
yeah. Well, I have, fortunately, I'm a former athlete. I'm old now, Jeff. You can't tell, okay? But I used to play football back in the day, and I had some amazing coaches, really pouring into me. And all throughout, I wrestled and played football, baseball, and all those things. But football was my first love, and so I've had some football coaches throughout my life kind of guide me and help me to set some goals. But in college, I'll never forget my freshman year. I made a decision that I wanted to become an All American, right? I wanted to get into this college's Hall of Fame one day. And so, what did that mean for me? It meant that I was going to have to be the best on the team. I needed to be the best in the conference, and I needed to make a statement, right? I needed to do my part. And I also needed to be a good leader as a sophomore captain of this team. And so, that was a thing in learning to set my goals big early on in life. It followed me all throughout in my business career, professional career. And so I eventually did make it to the Hall of Fame, but I didn't go alone. You see, the reason I got there was from those coaches that poured into me, from the
Yeah.
teammates that I played with, right? And so it was a we goal. It was this thing. And so I have this habit of setting some really, really big goals, and they don't scare me. But here's what I do. I put goals down and I'm serious about them. Like I make a note card. I've got 5 major goals for myself in a given year. And those goals, I track them on my computer. A reminder pops up once a week for me to update my status. And I'm going to tell you, I keep a laminated card of those 5 goals with me in my briefcase. There's a card in my car and also in my closet. That means I'm seeing this thing at minimum 3 times a day. And so I'm either on pace, running behind, or I'm ahead. Either way, I'm not satisfied, right? Because my goals are attached to my boys. I'm a father of 3. And so the thing that motivates me is I want those boys to have better than I had growing up. I want to put those boys in a position that one day when I have grandbabies and I'm old and gray, right, that I'm able to do things with those grandbabies like my grandparents did with me. And that's spend time because I'm not having to chase money anymore because I've built wealth over time.
Well, I think you just did something there that I want to really point out, which is you talked about your goals. You talked about setting them big. You talked about the fact that you focus on them on a weekly basis. You track them so you know when there's a gap. You can change your activities to make up the gap. But then you tied in something really interesting: purpose,
Mm,
a reason why. In
yes.
page 134 of the one thing, I'll flip to it real quick because this is just so aligned. So many of us focus on just our productivity,
Yes.
the actions we take and the results that we get, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. And you can't truly be productive if you don't know your priority, and you
Hmm.
can't know your priority if you don't know why you're doing it, the sense of purpose. And I heard you say earlier on that so many of these millionaires learned about money from their parents.
Mhm.
And so, 2 dots I want to connect for everybody who's listening is, how many of you, out of curiosity, have children? If so, put me in the questions box. Let's see it real quick. A lot of you. Um, I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, Chris, and sometimes it's so easy to get just caught up in my actions, or my wife's and I's my actions, and not realizing that we're being a model for them.
Mm.
And so let's ask a tougher coaching question to those of you who are watching or listening to this. If your children are a reflection of you, what would your actions say about how they will treat money? And based on that, how do you feel about that?
Mm.
Put your answer in the question box. Steven says, no debt. Love it. Danielle says, ouch. What do you see as the thing that, Chris, when these people, it's our society, it's a societal norm that most people are not doing the right activities to build wealth. What's the thing that you've seen that flips the switch for them?
I would have to say, in all honesty, for the switch to get flipped, I think it's tapping them into their dream, getting them to think about what's the thing you've always longed for. As I talk with people, and I travel, I speak on money, business, and leadership. And so I do a lot of leadership things around the country. But, I've heard people say, well, someday I want to, right? Someday I want to grow my company, or someday I want to grow my business, or even in relationships, someday I'd love to go visit. And I tell them, I've been around a little while and I've looked at every kind of calendar there is, paper, digital, and I've never seen someday on the calendar. Like I've never seen that. There's not a month of the year that's someday. There's no somedayuary. There's no somedember, right? It's not on there. And I say, no. See, listen, we got to get clearer. Like what day? What day are you taking your parents on that trip for their 40th anniversary? What day are you planning to take them grandbabies to Disneyland and hold them little sticky hands from them eating cotton candy and walking through that park at a stroll pace because you're not in a rush with a Mickey Mouse t-shirt on? See, I just told you a little bit of my dream right there. But
Oh yeah, I just got a
when it,
great visual.
you tap into that, and that's my thing. See, I see my dreams in high definition. I've seen a lot of TVs out there, and I've seen football and golf and all kinds of great sports, and you can see it crystal clear. I want to help people to tap in their dreams so they see it inside themselves crystal clear as an HD or a 4K TV. Envision yourself doing that thing that gets you up out of bed and watch what happens. See, you stop focusing on being busy and you get focused on being effective. Because when you're effective, it means you matter to somebody. You matter to yourself and you impacted somebody else's life. That's the difference in living and just existing.
Yeah, I love that. How many of you have ever had one of those days where you were so busy and you looked up at the end of the day and you thought to yourself, I was really busy. Did I get anything done? So put me in the questions box. I should say
I've been there.
everybody. Okay. Crystal's
Absolutely.
amen. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
that's really where your day starts running you instead of you running your day.
well, it's how many of you have ever gone on vacation and that day before vacation, like you were just so clear on what had to be done and you were the pinnacle of productivity. What I'm hearing you say, Chris, is you are so clear about where you are going, what you want to achieve, why you want to achieve it. And you are not focused on being busy, you are focused on being effective, which
Yes.
doesn't mean that you have to work long hours. It's that you're clear on the things that you matter most and you do the things that matter most.
Thank you for saying that, buddy. I am right in the middle of what matters most. That means, when I'm at work, guess what? I work. And when I'm at home, guess what? I'm at home. And see this shift in that and looking at it, I understand this as I learned to set goals. My grandparents have all passed away now, and I'm just so grateful for the time they spent pouring into this little Kentucky boy. And if I can be half the grandparent they were, I will be successful. But I remembered something. I was looking at the photo albums a couple years ago, and I was in the middle of working on the book, and I stopped, and my sons came in. They said, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I was just looking at photo albums." I said, "I was looking at my grandparents, Nan and Grandpa." And I said, I miss them so much. And they were like, yeah, you look at that every once in a while. I said, because I need to be reminded. I need to be reminded of the sacrifices they made for me, but also in understanding, son, I work hard, not just for you all, but I'm also working hard for your kids one day. And I'm also working hard for the legacy of the people that let me get to where I am. They paved the way for me. And so this legacy thing is like a baton. My grandparents passed it to me, or they passed it to my mom. My mom passed it to me. And one day I'm going to pass it to you. I said, that's the goal. You realize everything you do, you're bringing all the people that love you with you. And I want them to be proud. And so
Yeah.
that for me was one of those moments where the boys started to see things a little bit different.
Yeah, and somebody had mentioned, I hear people talking about kids as their purpose so often, yet I don't have any.
Hmm.
What do you see in terms of other whys of people that maybe is not their children?
Yeah. Oh, I've run into a lot of successful people that don't have kids, but they might have a niece or a nephew, right? Or they have a charity that they really believe in. One gentleman, I'm going to tell you something. I was blown away by him. His goal was in giving. He wanted to do a lot of gifts for people in underprivileged neighborhoods. And this guy was giving $50,000 to $60,000 away a year, right? And the pride in his face. I asked him. I said, "So you don't have kids?" He goes, "No, that's not true." He said, "I probably have close to 15,000 of them." He said, "I just don't see them every day." And that touched my heart right there. Because what you realize is that family has nothing to do with blood. It's that commitment to something that's bigger than yourself, of having an impact. And so I've seen people be, motivated in making an impact in their career, in their giving, in mission trips, in supporting people that go on mission trips. And so there's so many things out there. I just think, listen, we live in America. This is the greatest country on the planet, and I'm 100% biased. But we live in a country where we can decide, right? You remember permission slips back in the day? They
Oh
made it.
yeah.
Okay, well, you couldn't go on the field trip at school if your parents didn't sign a permission slip. And I'll never forget, I was writing the book and I realized, you know what? People need to realize you don't need a permission slip to be successful in life. You don't need a permission slip to be an everyday millionaire. You get to sign your own permission slip. And what we have to do is don't ever forget we have that authority and that ability to decide. Decide to do some things different. Decide to make those small changes that can lead to big gains and watch what happens.
Let's unpack that a little bit. What goes into making that decision? Because I hear you say just decide, and it sounds so simple, yet I can very vividly think of the times that I made a decision and there was something, there was a true catalyst.
Mm. I mean, for me, for me personally, I mean, my thing is my family, right?
Yeah.
But it's also the people I interact with when I go do a speaking engagement, or the people that may pick up my book, and that's the first opportunity they have to hear some encouraging, positive words. My life mission is simple. I want to educate, encourage, and empower as many people as I can in my life. That one day when I'm dead and gone, somebody will bump into one of the Hogan boys and they'll say, I saw your daddy speak, or I read one of his books, and that man encouraged me to think bigger for myself. You see, I hope one day that gets spoken, that my great great grandkids will get to hear something like that and really realize that they too have the power to choose for themselves.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I remember it was one of my first meetings with Gary Keller, and the purpose of the meeting was for me to share my business plan, to cast the vision for the business. Because if they had to do the thinking for me, I was fired, basically. And I remember I shared the vision. He said, "That's great," but then he asked a really profound question. He said, "What will be the give element that you weave into the heart of your business
Wow.
that'll win over the heart of the world?"
Mm,
And for so many of us, we view our jobs or our businesses as a vehicle of building wealth, which for many people just means to obtain things. And in that moment, it was like, oh man, like everything that we are doing here is about using the business as a vehicle to make impact.
mm,
And so I would just ask every single one of you, whether it's your job, your business, what's that give element that you can weave into the center of why you are doing what you do?
mm. I
And how
really
will that change things?
I like that. That is powerful. And in the giving, it's not just with money, but we can give with our time as well as our talent. And I think, looking at it, I think the first place we can have an impact, obviously, is in our homes, but also in our places of business or as we treat customers, how we treat them. And so I think we have an incredible opportunity to try to help everybody to become better.
Yeah.
And when you have a heart that's better, it keeps you from getting bitter.
Yeah. So Chris, I want to fly back up to 10,000 feet because Val just made a great comment, which I really appreciate, which he said, for those of us who, we're not married, we don't have kids, let's line the dominoes up for them so that they are clear exactly on how do they begin to take action so that they can start to unleash that domino effect in their life.
Well, I think the first thing, it goes back to kind of the triad that I talked about before. Beliefs. What do you believe is possible for you? What do you believe that you can achieve? Right? What are the causes that you believe in that you really want to someday support or go visit or spend time doing? That belief thing's a big thing to spend some time with. And then
Mm,
it's the knowledge of start to understand, what do you need to do more of to put you closer to it? And what do you need to start doing less of? And then what do you need to stop doing altogether, right, to help
mm,
you get there? And then the actions, right, and blending it in. And so when you decide today, that means you take action today. And that first action was the decision. But now let's list out those things. I used to tell people I've got this AAA process. I used to work with pro athletes, entertainers, and musicians. And I would tell them, they would say, well, I want to do better. And I go, well, what does better look like? And so my AAA process is to assess where you are, right? Acknowledge what you can improve, and then activate a plan of action, the three A's. And so that can help you in your parenting, that can help you in relationships, it can help you in your money. And so I think not your beliefs, your knowledge, and your actions, along with the AAA process of assessing, acknowledging, and activating, man, that puts you on a plan to start moving some things to make things happen.
yeah. And yes, the big question, which is, rephrase it for me. Wasn't what do you want? Where did you start?
Oh, I was talking about you got to first talk about what you believe, right? And the
Yeah.
belief.
Okay. So
Yeah.
when you ask a question like that, like, what do I believe?
Mm,
I think a lot of people quickly hit this wall of, I don't know.
yeah.
So I would ask those of you who are watching or listening to this, how long do you think you'd have the minimum amount of time, not the max, the minimum amount of time that you could sit down to ask that question and search,
Mm,
to
mm,
push past the wall of I don't know and really ask the question, what do I believe about money? What do I believe is possible for me? And just to get it down, not that it's going to be perfect in one try, but what would that look like if once a week you sat down for 5 minutes and journal on that? How long do you think or how many times do you think you'd have to sit down before you got a sense of direction, enough for you to feel like I'm going to go there? I'd love to see your answers in the questions box. Chris, what
No,
do you think?
I love that. I think when you spend time doing that, what you start to do is, I think initially for me, I heard my family's voice, right?
Mm,
My family were super encouragers. And I'll never forget my grandmother telling me, baby, you can achieve the thing if you're willing to do the things. And that was something. And Mama Hogan told me, I'll never forget this. She says, Christopher. Now, whenever she said Christopher, I paid attention, right? Because I realized she just used the full name, and there's either wisdom coming or a whooping, right? I needed to listen. But she said, Christopher, I don't want you to ever be a Ben brother. And I said, a Ben brother? She goes, yeah, I don't want you to be a would have been, a could have been, or a should have been. I
mm,
want you to do some things. And that kind of encouragement, when I look at and think about what do I believe? Well, I believe anything's possible if I'm willing to put in the work.
yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you've got some viewers that I'm sure will identify with this. As much as you've had some encouragers in your life, you also have had some detractors in your life, some doubters, some people that will look at you and tell you you can't do something. And I just want you to smile. And I just want you to smile and do what I did. And that is, I'll show you, right? Because you can't deny results. And so magnify the support and minimize the haters and the doubters. That's what we
Yeah.
have to do.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And to recap on some of the feedback, Crystal said, maybe 2 weeks. She'd have the sense of direction.
Wow.
Barbara said, just once a week for 30 minutes. Salma said, just a few minutes a day. And here's what I love about this. This is the concept of thinking big and going small, which I think a lot of people, the mistakes they make when they want to live the one thing is they think big, or in your book, like, I want to become this everyday millionaire. It's a big concept, but then you try to act big. You try
Mm,
to do it all. You try to master budgeting, and you try to learn to invest in real estate, and you try to figure out stocks, and you also want to become an angel investor. And you look at all the things,
yeah.
but you don't identify the one thing.
Mm.
And so how do we get really clear on that little 2-inch domino that if we just flicked a finger and knocked it down over time, it all becomes possible?
I think I'd have to start with belief. Do you
Yeah.
believe it's possible for you to become an everyday millionaire? Do you believe it's possible for you to do a better job budgeting this month? Do you believe it's possible for you to get that debt paid off in the next 6 months, starting with the little one first? Like, if you can decide in that moment that you believe you can, then I think you quickly will go to, I think I should. And
Yeah.
when you connect the dream to the should, that's where you decide to make actions. And I love what you're saying, because it's not a matter of just deciding today, but you end up actually deciding every day. You make decisions in what you do and what I'm not going to do. But you know
Yeah.
what? That goes back to us being in control.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody asked me to put this up earlier, so you just threw me a little softball, Chris. That's why this is my favorite quote. People
Hmm.
do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. So I'd be curious, for those of you who are watching or listening to this, what's the one thing that's currently stopping you from
Hmm.
being an everyday millionaire? Put that answer in the questions box. Maybe it's I suck at budgeting. Maybe it's I don't think I earn enough income. What, maybe you have too much debt. What is that number one thing that is stopping you from getting there? Comfort
Hmm.
says organization. Salma says beliefs, a value filter, saying yes to everything and no, time, investment capital, frivolous spending, myself and debt, focused effort on paying off debt,
Wow.
overspending, debt. So I'm seeing a lot of the common themes I'm seeing here, Chris. It's either debt or they don't feel like they have enough money.
Hmm.
So let's talk about that.
Well, I'm going to say first and foremost, for everyone that put an answer out there, thank you. Because when you put that answer in there, you decided to participate,
Yeah.
and that's how quick we can do that. Some keystrokes, got your answer out there. Imagine us doing that inside of our minds, of keystroking and making some decisions and making decisions in our heart. So for the people that are talking about debt, debt is a thief. We're the most marketed to country on the planet where,
Mm.
we have all these commercials coming at us and all this stuff. And, we start to have this mentality that we deserve, right? Well, I deserve to have that. Now, be careful now because deserve will put you on an island. And that island is many, many miles away from your dream. And so be careful. Don't ever get out of whack to where your wants are getting in the way of your needs. But looking at it and just making a decision of number one, I'm not going to go into any more further debt. I'm going to get serious and start attacking the debt that I have. And so list your debts out smallest to biggest. I teach people the debt snowball approach that I'm not going to attack debt based off interest rate. No, I'm going to start with the little one first. You know why? Getting out of debt's not about math. It's not even about an interest rate. It's about momentum. It's about us taking action and attacking the little $500 credit card, paying it off, and then moving down to the $800 credit card because what you're doing is proving to you that you can. See, that
Mhm.
goes back to the belief. Now you believe you can, and then you start to believe that you should. And that's that thing that'll get you going. So if you're in debt, hear me. Where you are right now doesn't have to be where you end up, but we're going to have to decide and keep deciding each day. For people out there that are saying they don't have enough income, listen, I need you to start right where you are. Please don't do like I did some almost 16 years ago where I was believing the lie that I needed to make more money to make more progress. No. See, what I needed to do was to start right where I was. That is, whatever income you're making right now, get more intentional with budgeting, get more intentional with your spending and dreaming, and just start right where you are. Because you said it, Jeff, more money only reveals more of what you already were. So if you're not good with money with 20,000, you're definitely not going to be good with 60. But if
Yeah.
you can be good at 20 or 30,000, and I mean, you've got it budgeted, you're in control. I promise you, you'll go further faster when you're making 50, 60, and 70 because you've established what you've hit on several times, the habit.
Yeah. And I'll speak to the income thing because that just strikes me very personally. I got to a level in medical sales where I had a great income, but I didn't have the right habits.
Mm,
And the habit that I lacked was the habit of establishing a lifestyle to match a budget.
yes.
My income rose, so did the lifestyle. But then when my company slashes my income by 40% and I witness a colleague have a stroke at 35 years old, all within 1 week of each other, I have a massive wake up call. And I remember my wife became a stay at home mom. We had just bought a house in Orange County that we couldn't afford, and we just had our first child. And now she's a stay at home mom, and those things all happen. And I made a promise to myself that I would never let us get into this situation again. And we really battened down the hatches. And then
Mm,
we moved to Austin to start this company with Gary and Jay. And even though, despite my best intentions, I neglected to understand that as kids get older, they get more expensive. I neglected to understand that in Texas, property taxes reassess every single year, and that when you get pets, it's not just the initial cost, there's reoccurring costs associated with all those things. We found ourselves in this situation again.
yeah.
And so this time I asked the question, if people don't decide their futures, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures, what's the habit we're missing?
Mm,
Habit to make a budget match a lifestyle. Okay, well, what's the one thing I can do to make a budget match a lifestyle? We have to have a budget. Well, what's the one thing we can do to make sure that we have the budget? I kept whittling it all the way down to that little 2-inch domino that my wife and I can do is, can we just sit down once a week and
mm,
talk about our money? That could
mm,
be a 5-second conversation. It would not be very effective, but if we had the conversation, it's a win for the week.
mm. That's good. No, that's fantastic. And I think for the people that are watching, it shows the practical step to take to drill down. But I'm going to say something to you, Jeff. What you had, my friend, was clarity. I'm amazed at how stress and some hard times in life can give us some wisdom. And sometimes we have to repeat it, right? Sometimes, but eventually we get that lesson and we go, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to go there anymore. And I'm going to be more focused than I ever was. So I want your viewers to also be aware that, hey, if you've made a mistake with money, welcome to the human race, right? Just welcome. We've all been there. I've done it. I've got the hat and the t shirt from making mistakes, but it wasn't where I ended up because, like Jeff, I made some decisions for myself and
Yeah.
decided, you know what? I'm not going back to watch that movie again of me doing stupid. I've watched that movie. I know how that could end. I want a different movie. And so what do? You change the DVD. And that DVD in this example are our actions, our beliefs, and really our knowledge. So those three things are crucial for anything.
Yeah. So there's one more question I want to ask. There's a call to action for all of you. We're going to identify the one thing you can do based on that. Before we all do that, I want to make sure everybody knows the book is called Everyday Millionaires. This has taken off. It is a national bestseller. If you do not have it yet, pick it up anywhere books are sold. And we will also let you know that next month on April 10th, we got your boy Ken Coleman's coming on the show.
Oh, fantastic.
So
Yes. I am very excited about what he's got going on, so I can't wait for him to join you.
yeah, so that's all coming up. So the next steps, folks, here's what we need to do. This will be coming out on the One Thing podcast. If you are not yet subscribed, please do so. And check out, Chris, what's the name of your podcast?
I've got the Chris Hogan show out there, and
There we go.
that's where I actually will take callers, talk about money questions, talk about life questions. We have a lot of fun. And so you can find it on YouTube, or you can go to my website, chrishogan360.com.
Yep, there we go. And one final question, and then we'll do everybody's going to identify their one thing. How do you get a significant other who's just not interested in having the conversation to have the conversation?
I think it goes back to the dream. Even though, a lot of times you may have a spouse that has had a bad experience with money, or their parents never talked about it. I think the best place to start is with dreams, because we all have dreams. For people who have kids, they've got dreams either for themselves, but they also have dreams for their kids. People without kids, they've got dreams for themselves, or dreams about something they want to do for someone in their family or somebody in their community or some kind of charity. So I think having that dream meeting is the first step, and really just beginning to have a conversation, because people feel threatened with money. People feel threatened with what they don't understand. And so leading with the dream can start to begin to open that door and engage more conversation.
That's great. So, folks, out of everything that you've heard today, whether it's beliefs, whether it's budget, whether it's changing your mindset around income, whether it's having the dream meeting with your significant other, here's the question. What's your one thing? What's the one thing you can do? You will make a decision to do it, such that by doing it, by knocking down that lead domino, everything else will be easier or unnecessary. Put the answer in the questions box. Donna says, change the mindset. So Donna, that's think big, act big. Let's go smaller. What's the one thing you can do that would make changing your mindset easier or unnecessary? Get it to a 2-inch domino. You flick the finger and it falls. Set goals, reminders, and visuals. Megan, what's the one thing you can do to set your goals? Lisa says, make the calls every day. Lisa, what's the minimum number of calls you could make to feel like you knocked down the domino? What's the littlest domino that you can knock down? Michelle says, discover my true dreams. Michelle, what's the one thing you can do to discover your true dreams? Cheryl says, pay off my debt. Cheryl, you know what I'm going to ask you. What's the one thing? Keep it coming, folks. This is really what it looks like. Ask the question, search for the answer, and keep asking it until you get it to a 2-inch little domino that if you knock that down, everything else falls. Chris, what would you suggest to people that their lead domino be?
I think the lead domino is I'm going to list and take 2 actions today that lead me in my direction. And that might be, number one, verbalizing that I'm going to tell an accountability person that I'm going to do better, that I'm going to go home. And if I've done silly with money, I'm going to apologize to my spouse and say, I love you. We're going to do this thing and let's sit down and get serious. And I think that all really falls under decision. I'm going to decide to act. I'm going to decide to do better because I know better is available.
I love that. I love that. Well, folks, the man, the myth, the legend, the big man with the big voice, author of Everyday Millionaires, Chris Hogan. Thank you. Sincerely.
Thank you, my friend. It was an honor to be with you.
Yep. All right, folks, we're giving you your time back. Thank you so much. And we look forward to being with you next month at the One Thing webinar.